Welcome to the Wicket.
Hello, and it's time for another episode of your favourite cricket chat at The Wicket, Arab News' very own cricketing podcast. I'm your host, Brian Murgatroyd, and with me once again to discuss what's happening in the sport locally in the Gulf, regionally in Asia and worldwide, are Arab News columnist Jon Pike and Arab News cricket reporter Subas Humagain. Hello, gentlemen.
Yes, hello, Brian and Subas.
Hi, John. Hello, Brian.
And in this episode, we talk Test cricket with Bangladesh's historic first long-form success against Pakistan in Rawalpindi. And there's England's success against Sri Lanka in Manchester. Plus, we debate the merits of the suggestion the ICC may launch a Test cricket fund to try and protect the format against the player drain to short-form competitions. The West Indies and South Africa are playing a men's T20 international series in Trinidad and Tobago. We'll discuss that. The location for the upcoming ICC Women's T20 World Cup has been shifted from Bangladesh to the United Arab Emirates. We assess that decision. We also speak about the new Bangladesh Cricket Board President Farooq Ahmed's comments about the incumbent coach Chandika Hathurusingha. We wrap up the Sri Lanka Women's Tour of Ireland and chat about the latest round of matches in the men's ICC World Cup League 2. And on top of that, as ever, Subas and Jon tell us what's caught their attention in the world of cricket in the recent past. As ever then, plenty to discuss, so let's get going. There's been a historic test match in Rawalpindi as Bangladesh have secured their first ever win against Pakistan in the longest format, winning by 10 wickets with more than a session to spare. For much of the match, a result seemed unlikely, as Pakistan made 448 for 6 before declaring, but then Bangladesh replied with 565, led by former captain Mushfiqur Rahim's fantastic 191. With a lead of 117, Bangladesh's spinners then got to work on the final day, and with Shakib Al Hassan taking 3 for 44 and Mehdi Hassan Miraz returning figures of 4 for 21, Pakistan was skittled for 146, leaving Bangladesh just 30 to win, a target they knocked off in 6 overs and 3 balls. Subas, first things first, what an incredible victory for Bangladesh, especially after they spent much of the first 2 days of the encounter chasing leather as Saud Shakil with 141 and Mohammad Rizwan with an unbeaten 171 put them to the sword.
Indeed, Brian, it was a great win. Their first against Pakistan and only third away from home in the last 7 years. I think their reply after the declaration was excellent, especially the way Mushfiq held the innings and got runs consistently. I think that's where Bangladesh thought this could be their match. And the turning point, I think, in third innings when the pressure was piled up by the pacers. And since they got the early wicket, the spinners, Mehdi and Saqib bowled really well. They played according to the situation, and Pakistan's reliance on pacers, I think that could have been the case of changing the match.
Well, Jon, a word on Mushfiqur's effort. He debuted as an 18-year-old in the UK in 2005, and he's still going strong. It was his 11th Test 100. What a phenomenal effort it was.
Yes, that's 19 years at the highest level and 89 Test matches. His first century against Pakistan. His preparation was he played for Bangladesh A for the first time in 16 years. Apparently he was last to leave practice sessions leading up to the tests, and the result was a very dedicated innings of 8 hours and 42 minutes. And his 191 took him past Tamim Iqbal's record for most runs and centuries in overseas test matches for Bangladesh. And it was also Mushfiqur's first overseas century in 7 years. So quite phenomenal effort, I agree.
Subas, after the way the match unfolded on what was, not for the first time in recent history, a very docile Rawalpindi pitch, all eyes will be on the Pakistan think tank, which opted not to include a specialist spin bowler, as you alluded to a little earlier. It appears as though that decision backfired and cost them dear.
Yes, indeed. I think they did not have a specialist spinner on the track where Bangladesh played with two. If you consider Saqib's bowling, I think that's been the strength of Bangladesh, that they can have plan B, and to not understand the home conditions, probably, I think that could have cost the Pakistani team the match. The way Saqib and Mehdi partnered in that third innings, I think they never let the Pakistan middle order settle. And if you see the recent years, Pakistan have struggled, and it's on and off the pitch where they're struggling with team combination and everything. But I think the way the pacers couldn't handle the pitch, especially that Bangladeshi batting, they give them a lot of space to play, and having a spinner would have certainly helped.
Well, that said, John, and with due respect for the fact a result was achieved, the surface wasn't a great one, was it? It had precious little in it for bowlers of any sort for the first 4 days, and the Rawalpindi crowds voted with their feet and stayed away for the most part.
Pakistan's assistant coach, Azhar Mahmood, admitted the behaviour of the Rawalpindi surface, which had took them by surprise. He believed that a pitch had been prepared to aid seam bowling, which is a major factor in selecting a seam attack and no specialist spinner. There's thought that perhaps the hours of sunshine prior to the start dried the pitch out, which did have grass on it at the beginning. Either way, I think it's going to be a pretty big disappointment to Tony Hemmings. As you know, he's a highly experienced curator, and he's brought in to create pitches with pace and bounce. As for the crowds, it could be that the white ball cricket that Pakistan have served up recently has left them disillusioned. The off-field behaviours that Subas alluded to, change of captaincy, not handled very well, internal power struggles, and a poor T20 World Cup campaign seem to have combined to create a lack of trust amongst the spectators.
Well, John, what does this result do straight away for new Test coach Jason Gillespie, I wonder? I know Rome wasn't built in a day, but in an environment where so often you're either a hero or zero, it's far from an ideal start, isn't it?
Certainly not, especially as he was videoed having a heated exchange with Captain Shah on the team balcony during the match. I think things need to improve pretty quickly for both of them.
And Subas, we should also put Bangladesh's win into the context of remarks by the incoming Bangladesh Cricket Board President Farooq Ahmed, shouldn't we? In his first media conference after taking over from Nazmul Hassan following the country's political upheavals, he said that he wanted to find, in his words, someone better than the current head coach, Chandika Hathurusingha. This was his position before he ascended to the top job, so in that sense you can admire the fact he's sticking to that position, but it's a remarkable comment coming during a tour in which Hathurusingha is in charge, isn't it?
Well, the new president is entitled to his opinion, but I'd stay put with Hathurusingha. The team is in transition, and without Saqib in matches to come, I think they'll need to have someone who knows the team around, and to change the coach at this time, I think it's going to have a lot of repercussions. So a lot of changes and on and off the pitch might affect the team. But if you look at the recent results, I think the team has done well under Chandika, and I think they should back him rather than looking for more instability.
Well, John, Hathurusingha and the players have responded to the comments of Farooq Ahmed in the best possible way by winning, but it does seem an amazing thing to say, given the fact the team was playing at the time, doesn't it? And despite the result, surely now Hathurusingha is on borrowed time, isn't he, given the position of the president?
Yeah, he's under contract until the 2025 Champions Trophy. I think he's under no illusions about his position. And he's actually said that he will go if he's not required. And Ahmed has indicated that the availability of coaches is going to be assessed. He knows that they're not always available at the right time. But I think it's all to do with the changing of the guard within Bangladesh and within the BCB as well. And it means that more change is inevitable. And it looks like Shakib Al Hassan's position is also subject to review, given his political involvement with the party that was defeated.
Well, this is a 2-match series, and the second match starts at the same venue on August the 30th, with Pakistan battling to avoid a first series loss to their visitors. We'll keep across that match and chat about it next time here at the Wicket. England won the first test of their three-match series against Sri Lanka at Old Trafford, ending up victorious by 5 wickets in what turned out to be an excellent advertisement for the format. Sri Lanka was 6 for 3 and then 40 for 4 in their first innings, and also 2 wickets for just 1 run second time round. But their middle and lower order players showed real application in bitterly cold conditions. Captain Dhananjaya de Silva and debutant Milan Ratnayaka both scored fighting 50s in that first innings, and in the second innings, Kamindu Mendis made his third Test 113, and with 65 for Angelo Matthews and Dinesh Chandimal's 79, they set England a testing last innings target of 205. But it was Jamie Smith's match. The Surrey wicketkeeper batter made 111, a superb maiden Test 100, to help England to a first innings lead of 122, and then coming in with the match in the balance in the fourth innings, as England were 119 for 4, he made 39 from 48 balls, and together with Joe Root, who made an unbeaten 62, steadied any nerves England may have had. John, you were at the Test, shivering like I think every spectator there because it was bitterly cold, and aside from that miserable weather with the cold winds, it was a terrific match, wasn't it?
Yeah, Sri Lanka's fighting spirit was impressive and welcome, especially after slipping to 6 for 3 early on day one. As you could say, bitter conditions, which I can vouch for, added to their lack of preparation, meant they were always likely to be on the back foot, but they managed to set England that tricky target. And I think all credit to Joe Root for steering the reply, batting in a way to which he's well suited, and a bit of a throwback to how Test cricket used to be played.
Talk to us too about Jamie Smith. England seem to have unearthed a gem here, haven't they?
Well, it's early days. It's been an impressive introduction. As I've said before, at Surrey, everybody knew that he could bat, but the keeping was a doubt. So far, dispelled. I think the big tests are going to be how he performs against India and Australia.
Subas, where do you stand on Sri Lanka's performance? Is it glass half full or half empty for you?
Well, early wickets put them in back foot in both the innings. We talked about their opening period in previous episodes, and they couldn't stand tall in this testing condition. It was same with the England Lions in the practice match, and the same will continued in the first match as well. Well, bowlers need to have something to bowl at, so it's the top order that needs to step up if they want results in their favour.
John, it's not all rosy in the garden for England, though, is it? Mark Wood, after once again bowling at the speed of light, was forced off with a thigh injury that appears to have ended his series. He's 34, and although he's bowling faster than ever, is it too much of a risk to pin hopes on him to be part of a pace attack in Australia in just over a year's time, as the selectors seem keen to do?
It's clear that the squad is going through transition. There's admitted by them focus on the fast bowling. Wood's always been prone to injury, and I can't see that an attack can be really based around him. I think that's false thinking. Atkinson looks to be establishing himself. Bit surprised that Josh Hull has been called up. I thought Pennington might have been jettisoned, but then I see that he's injured. I don't know, it smacks a bit of panic, but there's certainly a big shuffling of the pack to try and work out, who's going to emerge as a major contender for the Ashes. I'm more concerned, as I've said before, about the top of the batting order, which still looks very flaky and is likely to be exposed by Australia's quartet of bowlers.
John, a word too on Ollie Pope's debut as England captain. It produced 2 low scores for him, 6 and 6. But how did you think he went in charge of the team?
Well, the history books are going to say that he won. I mean, he didn't look at all flustered. He filtered advice from bowlers and senior players. He had a clear plan, a refined baseball approach to it all. It seems that brought the best out of Joe Root. Perhaps the responsibility of captaincy led to subpar performances with the bat. I think it's a big ask for a relatively young man who's not had very much captaincy experience to perform with the bat, given that all that will be going through his head in terms of captaining the side. I think we need to give him a bit of space, really.
Well, the second test of the series gets underway on August the 29th at Lord's in London, and we'll reflect on that encounter next time we get together here at the Wicket. There have been reports in the media suggesting that the ICC may be set to agree on a fund to try and encourage players to stick with Test cricket in the face of the financial inducements of switching to T20 franchise cricket instead. The reports emanating from Australia suggest a fund could be agreed later this year, with the idea of giving players higher match fees per test and also helping those teams for whom Test cricket is a loss leader to stage matches on a regular basis. The plan is reportedly the brainchild of Cricket Australia chair Mike Baird and has, so it's claimed, the support of England and India. John, I just wonder what you make of these reports. It is leaking this idea just kite flying by Cricket Australia to try and test the water and see whether there's an appetite for it, or is there substance to this, do you think?
Well, I've been pretty sceptical about it until now, but it looks to be gaining wings. A dedicated fund of, at least 15 million US dollars is proposed. It's reported to have the support of Shah and the England and Welsh Cricket Board. Not only would the fund increase the minimum match payment for Test players, it would also cover the cost of sending teams on overseas tours and support national boards like the West Indies, which currently struggle to compete with the wages offered in the global T20 competitions. I think there's two matters to consider at this stage. We know that the beneficiaries won't be India, Australia and England because they already offer substantial salaries to their players. And secondly, is a dispute with the broadcast Star Network, which wants to renegotiate the 2022 broadcast deal with the ICC and reduce its value to half the original cost of over $3 billion US dollars. And I think that will have a huge bearing on the amount of money and this particular proposal.
Subas, from the reports you've seen, will 15 million US dollars be enough to help stop the player drain towards franchise cricket?
Well, this might be a temporary solution, but I think boards need to formulate something to manage this theft. Test cricket will definitely benefit a bit from this fund, but the players may not stick into this longer format only for money. I think it's not just about Test cricket, but even international duty and NOC issues will escalate if not thought about it. I think ICC needs to do something to regulate this issue. And I think Australia has taken a step up because we've seen India, Australia and England being pretty serious about Test cricket, but it's not the same case with other boards. So this one might push other boards to get more Test cricket options and the players may benefit from this.
Well, the reports suggest this issue will go before the ICC board later this year for approval, or, for that matter, tweaking or possibly even rejection. We'll keep an eye on that. Meanwhile, Indian media has been full of the suggestion that Shah, the Board of Control for Cricket in India's secretary, is set to take over as the ICC chairman after Greg Barclay, the New Zealander, was confirmed as standing down, having served two-year terms. Any new appointment would come via nominations from the ICC directors, which closed on August the 27th, with an election if more than one candidate is put forward, and the successful candidate would start the role on the 1st of December. John, is this just cricket politics, or is it something of genuine significance, do you think, for the average cricket fan?
I think this ascension by Shah was always likely. Significance for the average cricket fan? Will they notice, or with respect, even understand the significance? We know that Shah is immensely powerful and that the BCCI effectively rules cricket. And I think there'll be well-founded fears that the Indian control over cricket will increase and may even result in some degree of autocracy. I think it's really a matter of whether Shah acts in the best interest of the world cricket or runs the ICC as a fiefdom. And I have to say that I'm apprehensive.
Subas, let's look at it from the other perspective as well. What would this mean for Indian cricket if Shah took over as ICC chairman? Because it would mean he would have to stand down as BCCI secretary to take the role.
I think BCCI is already bigger than a portion now. The board has a system in place and there will be very little difference if Shah goes out. The way political interference, or should I say the impact is there, him being at the helm or not, won't have a big effect. You don't see honorary secretary post being as influential in other places anyway. So I think it's not a big deal for them.
And John, if this is goodbye for Greg Barclay, what would you assess his legacy to be, I wonder? Cricket in the USA, perhaps, via the T20 World Cup. Cricket back in the Olympics after a gap of more than 100 years. An expansion, possibly, of teams taking part in ICC events. Or, on the negative side of the ledger, the ambiguity over women's cricket in Afghanistan. There's the looming issue of India's participation in the ICC Champions Trophy in Pakistan. The increase in the number of ICC events putting more pressure on calendars. And I guess we can't ignore the continuing rise of T20 and T10 franchise competitions to the detriment of international cricket.
Well, I think it's all of that, both positive and negative. I mean, growth has been the mantra under his stewardship. I think a failure to establish a blueprint for cricket is going to be a black mark, irrespective of the pressures that must have been on him in regard to franchise cricket. I think the Afghan situation is a weakness. I know there are huge political issues involved with that, but I think a firmer stance would have been in order. I mean, as a chair, you have to carry people with you. But I think that despite the dissenting voices and pressures, the Afghan situation is a bad look. As for T20, well, no further comment. And then there's the issue of betting, which the ICC has hardly addressed, apart from some inconsistent banning of a handful of players. And I think the history books will look back, and an overriding impression is that the ICC has really been in thrall to India.
Subas, on Greg's watch, the ICC World Cup Super League came in and was then thrown out again after just one COVID-affected cycle. I wonder, from your perspective, given you're based in Nepal, how will associates look at his time at the head of affairs?
Well, it was another trial and error from ICC, which did not get the time it deserves. Super League was a great platform for the associate teams to lock horns with the top teams. It served as a pathway to the World Cup. I think that made the playing field level for the top teams and the associates. We saw West Indies coming down to play the qualifiers. I would have backed the continuity of that tournament, the league in years to come, given that the League 2 winner goes up to Super League and that. But I think had Greg Barkley's initiative been back, it would be great. But I hope that with Shah in place to go there, and he's been pretty positive with the ACC's pathway, I hope that ICC replicates something like that and there are more cricket for associate teams.
Well, rest assured, we'll keep an eye on and an ear out for news coming from the ICC's headquarters in Dubai and keep you abreast of all developments here at The Wicket. After South Africa's 1-0 win in a two-match test series against the West Indies, the two sides are playing a three-match 2020 international series in Trinidad and Tobago that marks the start of their preparations for the next T20 World Cup in Sri Lanka and India in 2026. As we record this podcast, the third and final match is being played, but the West Indies have already wrapped up the series thanks to two convincing wins in differing styles. In match one, they chased South Africa's 174 for 7, winning by 7 wickets with 13 balls to spare, as Nicholas Pooran went berserk, hammering an unbeaten 65 from only 26 balls, including 7 sixes. That the West Indies were chasing so many was down in large measure to Tristan Stubbs, whose 76 in 42 balls rescued his side from 42 for 5. Matthew Ford, with 3 for 27, was the main wrecker with the ball for the home team. In Game 2, the West Indies comfortably defended their total of 179 for 6, winning by 30 runs as Shamar Joseph and Romario Shepherd took 3 wickets apiece. Subas, these are an encouraging couple of results for the West Indies, aren't they? Given they're without the resting Andre Russell, Jason Holder and Alzari Joseph.
Well, the Windies have a great squad depth for sort of format, and Romario sorted with the ball in the second game. Pooran was at his best in the first win, and with CPL just around the corner, so we could see more talents coming up that can bolster the squad. And having seen their West Indies side here last year here in Nepal, I think there are big names still trying to get into the senior side. So I think there's a lot of talent. The West Indies, as we know, is T20 powerhouse, and with the emergence of new talents, I think it's only going to get better.
Jon, South Africa are without a host of leading players too, including Quinton de Kock, Heinrich Klaassen, David Miller, Kagiso Rabada, Keshav Maharaj, Tabriz Shamsi, Marco Janssen, Gerald Coetzee, Lungi Ngidi, Anrich Norkia. That's 10 first-choice players absent from these first two matches. So on that basis, I guess there are two questions. One, what is the point of this series? And two, are any of the players in this squad making a case for their retention when some of those big names come back?
Well, the first question is part of an even bigger question, which is bilateral v franchise at T20 level. Bilateral programs fixed some years ahead, so they need to be honoured. And it's ironic that in the juggling that the players embark upon, their availability, there are more of the top West Indies players available for this particular series than South Africans, who I have to say still had a pretty reasonable team. Mirza Hendricks is in there, Aidan Makram's in there, Tristan Stubbs is in there, Van der Doosen's in there. So it's not that they are weak. As far as players making a case, possibly Neil Bartman, but this is fairly limited evidence. And given that sort of Berger was very, very expensive in the first match, generally I think these sides, boards and selectors know pretty well who's going to make up the sides with a few tweaks.
We'll wrap up the final match of this T20I series next time here at the Wicket. Well, no sooner had we released our last episode of this podcast than the ICC announced it was switching the location for the upcoming Women's T20 World Cup from Bangladesh to the United Arab Emirates. The decision to take the tournament away from Bangladesh was no surprise given the uncertainty in the country at the moment following the overthrow of the government of Sheikh Hasina, considerable loss of life from protests around that overthrow, plus the change of leadership of the Bangladesh Cricket Board. John, given the need to keep matches in the tournament at similar times because of the requirements of broadcasters, plus the need to find internationally accredited venues that were ready to go, certainty with fine weather, and a location with an infrastructure used to supporting multiple teams, the UAE had to be the number one choice, didn't it, for the tournament? And were there any other places which you thought should have been in the frame?
Well, we know that Zimbabwe and Sri Lanka were in the frame. Worries Sri Lanka about the monsoon season. Zimbabwe, I think I feel a little bit of disappointment on their behalf. You could argue maybe they don't have the infrastructure, but they do have crowds and they attract people. And I think the worry is the small crowds in the UAE and how that situation is going to be dressed up. At a time when Zimbabwean cricket looks to be coming out of the doldrums, I think having some of it, the tournament there, would have breathed some life into its cricket. So I'm not quite sure why it was rejected, but I guess the UAE is a safe bet, given that it's next to the headquarters of the ICC.
Well, John, you've raised an interesting point there, because the ICC have confirmed that the two venues to be used for the tournament are Sharjah and the Dubai International Stadium, with the latter staging the final. Sharjah should work well, I think, as it's relatively intimate and even a small crowd there will create some atmosphere. But what are your thoughts on the use of the Dubai International Stadium instead of, say, the ICC Academy, I wonder? The crowds, as you've mentioned, and we do know, will be small, and it won't be a great look on television or create any sort of atmosphere for the players, will it?
No, it won't. I think that's a disappointing aspect. I guess they had to make a quick decision to switch. And, there are ways, as one has seen in India, of making small crowds look large. So I think it'll be down to television producers and camera people to create an illusion.
Subas, does the relocation of the tournament help or hinder any of the 10 teams taking part? And does it offer serious assistance, I wonder, to Scotland and Sri Lanka, who've got the most recent experience of playing in the UAE, albeit in Abu Dhabi, given they fought through the qualifying event in the country earlier this year?
Well, I think Sri Lanka and Scotland have played there recently, but the quality of oppositions will certainly be different. And we know the pitches are known to support the pace bowlers more than in the subcontinent. So We can take the example of Australia, who opted for just with Darcy Brown instead of Johnson, and that could be because of the conditions. This may not be a good news to India and the bowling attack, as the spin unit will have to toil harder than what it was originally supposed to be in Bangladesh. And same is the case with then host Bangladesh and Pakistan. So I think teams like South Africa and even England could benefit from this one.
Well, John, Subas has mentioned there Darcy Brown and also Taylor Velemic, two of the quicker bowlers in the women's game. Both of them have been named in the Australia squad. Can you see both playing together as a real pace powerhouse for the defending champions?
Possibly. I mean, they probably wouldn't have been selected if the event was in Bangladesh. And now they had a new dimension to an already extremely strong base for Australia.
And Subas, Pakistan have also named their squad, and it includes a new captain as all-rounder Fatima Sana, just 22 years of age, has been picked to lead the team in place of Nida Dar, although Nida does retain her place in the squad. I wonder what you make of that decision. Fatima has some level of experience. She's played 31 T20 internationals, but still, it's a lot of pressure on young shoulders, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. I think she has played 5 years in international cricket, and I think this decision from Pakistan is trying to eye a long-term solution. We saw a number of retirements from Pakistan's experienced players in recent years, and neither there might be in the same line after the World Cup. She's 37 already, so this may be an option from Pakistan to give the captaincy to younger player and maybe to give a fresh new start going into their new program. I think they've struggled in recent years, and counting on experienced players certainly hasn't helped. So maybe a fresh start.
Well, those 10 teams for the tournament are Australia, the defending champions, India, New Zealand, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Those 5 sides are playing in Group A, while in Group B are Bangladesh, India, Scotland, South Africa, who were the losing finalists in 2022, and also the West Indies. Now, let's wrap up the Sri Lanka women's tour of Ireland. In our previous episode, we spoke about Ireland's one-day international series win against the odds, winning back-to-back matches under different captains because of injuries. Sri Lanka managed to recover some pride, though, in the final match of the series with a comprehensive 8-wicket victory. Ireland never recovered from losing wickets to the first 2 balls of the match in that final game, and although they eventually scrambled to 122 all out, Sri Lanka knocked off the runs with 8 wickets and 26 overs and 5 balls in hand. Subas, Sri Lanka's 2 losses in the one-day international series have opened the door for the West Indies and New Zealand to pip them for automatic qualification for next year's ICC Women's World Cup, because they can overtake them now in the ICC Women's Championship table. This series loss, it could be very costly for Sri Lanka, couldn't it?
Yes, I think Sri Lanka made it hard for themselves. They have made the best of this, but could be safe if West Indies doesn't win 5 of the next 6, and with West Indies playing India and Bangladesh, it won't be an easy task. New Zealand too will face Australia and India, so final few games would be interesting, but I see 2 of these 3 teams going, and West Indies, I think they have a tough stuff in their hands.
John, Ireland now have 3 one-day internationals to come against England next month at the same venue, Stormont in Northern Ireland, followed by 3 2020 internationals in Dublin. Which Ireland women's team do you think will turn up for those matches, I wonder? The one that lost the all-important playoff match against Scotland for a place in the T20 World Cup and was also defeated in that last match against Sri Lanka, or the bright shiny one that won a T20 against Sri Lanka, plus those 2 one-day internationals on this tour?
Well, who knows? I think they'll be highly motivated by a contest against England. We know that England will be very formidable opponents, so I think one can look forward to a very competitive series.
Since our last episode, the Netherlands completed a clean sweep of their World Cup League Two home series against Canada and the USA, winning 2 matches against each side, and they've established a strong position at the top of the 8-team table that also features Scotland, Namibia, Oman, Nepal and the UAE. The USA and Canada have stayed on in the Netherlands for a T20I tri-series, and at the time of recording, the Netherlands won their opening 2 matches, one against either side, But it wasn't all sweetness and light for the Dutch, as they then lost to Canada in a remarkable match, which saw Canada recover from 35 for 6 in the ninth over to post 132 for 9, with the Dutch then losing 3 wickets for no runs in 7 balls, before eventually reaching 124 for 9 to lose by 8 runs. Subas, despite that loss to Canada, they look to be growing their player base quite nicely, don't they?
Yeah, and they're in dire need of that as well. You can never count on the county best players. We've seen under strength dot side touring Super League matches as well. Even in the League Two series, we've seen main players missing. So this time around, they're aiming to win League Two, and they'll need to have that numbers of players that they can rely upon. So I think having more options is certainly beneficial, but you'll need to get the performance along. And at this time, I think they're a bit inconsistent, but with time, they'll build a good bunch of squad.
John, by contrast, the USA, they've been without the injured fast bowler Ali Khan, while Corey Anderson has been playing T10 cricket in the Bahamas. This is a real welcome to the frustrations of associate cricket for Coach Stuart Law, isn't it?
Sure is. I mean, in what universe, does one lose a player to T10 cricket when they should be playing a longer format? I just think it's quite ridiculous.
And Subas, as for Nepal, how has their training camp in India gone? And when are they next in action now in World Cup League Two?
Well, the NCA is a great opportunity for the players. I think with facilities and guidance there, we have heard very little from what's going in inside. But in Nepal, there's persistent monsoon going here. So it's good that the players are getting some training ahead of the trip to Canada and the US. So the team is supposed to play Canada in September and US in October as part of the League Two series. So it's a good thing that the training is happening in India and it's consistent. So it remains to be seen how fruitful will it be as we will be tested in our conditions.
And finally, gentlemen, as we always do, let's hear from you about something that's caught your attention this week in the world of cricket. Subas, first of all.
Well, it was surprising to see Shakib Al Hasan playing in the match with his legal problems going on in Bangladesh and a lot of toll taking on him. We saw him throwing the ball towards Rizwan, stopping midway through his bowling. I think there should be some consideration about mental strength and all. We've seen talk about it going off the pitch, but when players are visibly struggling to get into the game, I think there should be some rules brought in to level the playing field. And I think mental state of players should be at the top of it.
Yes, Shakib Al Hasan among 147 people against whom charges have been filed in connection with an alleged murder during the protests in Bangladesh in early August. That said, he wasn't actually in Bangladesh at the time of the alleged offences, so we'll have to see how that one pans out. John, what about you? What have you got for us?
Well, a much different situation, as you know. I'm in rural southwest France at the moment, visiting some friends, and I announced to them that I'd found a cricket match, a half-hour drive away from where they're based. So I pitched up at a semi-final of a cup, and some raw talent on display, but in particular, I was taken with the welcome and hospitality of 4 players in this team who were refugees from Afghanistan with some pretty harrowing tales to tell. So they managed to find a place to play some decent cricket and have been well catered for in terms of mental health issues, which Subas has mentioned, as they relocate from a difficult situation in their country of birth to one in their adopted country. So it's quite a situation which is far removed from the political pressures there and also of the pressures of what we see in T20 franchise cricket and all the money that goes with it. So it does show that there's some humanity in the game of cricket and the social life that it engenders.
Well, heartwarming stuff there, John, and well done for finding out that particular story and going to watch some cricket while you're in France. I'm sure it's a bit warmer in France than it was in Manchester for the test match.
Way. A long way different, yes. And in fact, I've this week's column is going to feature my experience and something of the difficulties that France cricket finds itself in after some financial issues issues last year.
Well, that's good to hear, and we'll look forward to reading that column, which you can find at arabnews.com/cricket. So keep an eye out for that. Well, that's all from this episode of The Wicket. We'll be back soon with more cricket chat from the Gulf region, Asia, and worldwide. As ever, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on what you've heard wherever you get your podcast. But for now, this is Brian Murgatroyd along with Jon Pike and Subas Humagain saying thanks so much for listening. And until next time, goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.